We intentionally made spoiler posts so that we could use them in this video to highlight a completely predictable pattern of behaviour from the public when refugees or asylum seekers are discussed in a public forum. Step 1. Person X makes a fair, logical point about a concern they have over refugees. Specifically for Bolton, it could be the allocation of refugees for Bolton is not a fair distribution under this scheme. Step 2. The socialist or liberal enters the ring, who then calls person X a racist bigot and tries to use emotional guilt to portray that person as a heartless, uncaring monster, and yet the socialist is never able to justify why person X is a racist. Step 3. In steps the actual racist or far right with comments like "send them all back," which then justifies the socialist's reality. Step 4. Person X runs a million miles from the conversation for fear of being associated with the far right racist. The socialist or liberal spends the next hour arguing with the racist, nothing is resolved, open dialogue has been crushed by the socialist and the far right racist. Rinse and repeat this scenario 1,000 times for the last decade on social media. For us, what we would like to do is take the socialist, liberals, racists, far right and their misinformation, remove them entirely from the discussion, and allow the rest of us who want to get on with our lives to know the actual facts over refugees and asylum seekers. That's exactly what we want to provide you with: facts. So this video is about establishing the financial cost to integrate refugees who need our help, and if Bolton Council is capable of supporting them. Refugees do not get to decide where they are settled, but Bolton currently faces massive cuts, the closure of children's centres and the inability to even maintain our roads. We ask two questions. Should Bolton Council be accepting a third of all refugees under the Gateway Protection Programme, and is central government providing the financial support needed to help the refugees integrate? And, in our opinion, is Bolton Labour Council allocating more refugees to Bolton in order to rig the voting system with potential future Labour voters? We'd like to just clarify, refugees cannot vote, but in due time they are able to apply for British citizenship, which allows them to vote. As you'll also know, the vast majority of ethnic minorities vote overwhelmingly in favour of Labour. As for the issue of refugees, it's all very well sharing a post on Facebook about the suffering of those in war-torn countries, but actual real action to help those refugees comes with a financial cost. Education, hospitals, police, homes, social services, the benefit system, the cost of translators, the cost of translating literature, the time it takes in lost communication to access our services. Dr. Mahadvi of the Dean Clinic Health Centre yesterday told the BBC Radio 5 live report about the impact asylum seekers has on his practice. He said, "It does have an impact on day-to-day activity. We normally allocate 10 to 12 minutes for each patient, but asylum seekers will consume more time and make it more like half an hour." But before we get on to the Freedom of Information request from the Home Office, we need to establish the following. What is the difference between a refugee and an asylum seeker? An asylum seeker is someone who is seeking international protection but whose claim for refugee status has not yet been determined. In contrast, a refugee is someone who has been recognised under the 1951 Convention to the status of refugees to be a refugee. So, everyone under the Gateway Protection Programme is a recognised refugee who has legitimately had to flee their country in order to seek safety. They are not an economic migrant. Asylum seekers are not included in this information video, but there are roughly 931 asylum seekers in Bolton awaiting a review of their case for refugee status. We won't even be touching those figures for asylum seekers. This is about the Gateway Protection Programme. Now on to the Freedom of Information request regarding the Gateway Protection Programme. It was revealed in the Bolton News that in 2016 to 17, Bolton Council had taken a third of all refugees, despite the fact there was another 17 other local authorities involved in the scheme. Labour councillor Clifford Morris and council leader stated the following: The disparity in the number of refugees taken in by Bolton over the years compared to the rest of the country, and particularly the south, is staggering. The current system is unfair and in need of significant reform, and we will remind the government of our concerns. Clifford Morris is intimating that Bolton Council have no choice in how they're assigned refugees. Bolton Labour Council wants you to conclude that refugees are forced upon Bolton Council and that this unfair system needs reform. So, we contacted the Home Office under a Freedom of Information request and asked them an explanation as to why Bolton Metropolitan Borough Council has taken significantly more refugees than any of the other 17 local authorities. Has Bolton Council specifically requested taking more refugees for resettlement than other authorities? Was this by choice of Bolton Council? The Home Office stated to us, participation in the Gateway Protection Programme is voluntary, and the number of refugees that Bolton Council will resettle is a matter for the North West Gateway Resettlement Partnership and decided by Bolton Council as a member of that partnership. The Home Office have stated that Bolton Council not only chooses to be part of this programme, they have chosen to take in a third of all refugees. Clifford Morris has yet again violated the Code of Conduct, Honesty and Integrity by intimating that involvement of Bolton Council and the number of refugees was outside the control of Bolton Council. We then asked the total number of refugees settled in Bolton under the Gateway Protection Programme since 2004, to which they replied, the total number of refugees settled in Bolton under the Gateway Protection Programme since 2004 is 2,052. The final question we asked was the total funding provided what was the UKBA and is now the Home Office to Bolton Metropolitan Borough Council to aid the resettlement of refugees since 2004 in relation to the Gateway Protection Programme, to which they replied, the total funding provided from the Home Office UKBA to Bolton Metropolitan Borough Council since financial year 2005-2006 is £3,511,300.45. This figure does not include payments made in 2016-17 as this information has not yet been formally audited. According to the Bolton News, Bolton Council recovered roughly £500,000, bringing the total to £4,011,300.45. Now if we divide that by the number of refugees, which is 2,052, central government has provided only £1,954 per refugee to help them resettle in Bolton. Yet, the National Audit Office have estimated that every Syrian refugee who comes to Britain will cost taxpayers up to £17,340 per year on average for their first 5 years in the UK. That's £17,340 minus the cost of financial aid, which was £1,954, leaving us with £15,386 to support these refugees. If it costs £15,386 per refugee, and we have 2,052 refugees, that's £31,572,072. However, a significant amount of that additional £15,386 is still provided by central government, not local councils. An example of that provided cost would be the benefits system. But you're probably thinking this figure of £31,572,072 sounds absurd. Well, here's the Telegraph. Resettling 20,000 Syrian refugees in Britain will cost nearly £2 billion. Now, figure-wise, it's very difficult to track some of these costs. How do you calculate the cost of a doctor's appointment taking 30 minutes instead of 10 minutes? How do you calculate the cost of a teacher giving special attention to a pupil struggling with the language while neglecting the education of other children? How do you calculate the cost of our younger generation being unable to move into their own homes because 2,054 refugees need social housing? How do you calculate the cost of community cohesion if neighbours can't communicate because they don't even speak the same first language? We're already seeing tensions in communities rise in Bolton, Hate crime campaigns are being pushed and talked about practically on a weekly basis. Bolton is struggling to integrate communities who have lived in this town for generations. Halliwell and Braitmont are so alienated from each other they are practically two different countries. Accepting 2,054 refugees during this time of austerity are the delusions of a Labour Party out of touch with their constituents. A party that, in our opinion, has accepted such an absurd number of refugees, 1/3 of all refugees in the last year, despite the Gateway Protection Programme consisting of 17 authorities. They did this for one reason only. In our opinion, it is to rig the voting system with as many potential future Labour voters as possible in order to control Bolton. Bolton has done more than its fair share of aiding refugees to appease, in our opinion, the virtue signalling of groups like the Bolton Socialist Club. It is no coincidence that Bolton Socialists are the bastions of anti-racism with their rallies and demonstrations. Daring to discuss this sensitive subject is usually shut down by the left with their use of branding people racist. Anybody brave enough to discuss this subject openly face their jobs or careers being destroyed by a fanatic, intolerant, hateful militant left through propaganda, lies and intimidation. The left controls the narrative through fear and oppression, and you're either with them 100% or an enemy. There is no room for open dialogue in a socialist world. We need to leave the Gateway Protection Programme with immediate effects, and the people of Bolton need to be brave enough to speak out against the virtuous signalling socialists. Those 2,054 refugees in our town need help to integrate. But the more refugees we accept, the less help Bolton is able to provide due to the increasing financial cost. Under the Gateway Protection Programme, out of the total 7,643 refugees this scheme has allocated to England since its creation, 2,052 of those have been chosen by Bolton Council to be allocated to our town. The population of Bolton accounts for 0.49% of England's population, and yet we have taken 27% of refugees under this scheme for the whole of England. Our very big concern is over a new scheme called Syrian Vulnerable Persons Resettlement Programme. This scheme aims to resettle 20,000 refugees by 2020. The scheme is voluntary and starts with government support costs of £8,520 per person for their first year to the local authority and reduces each year. Will Clifford Morris sign up to this scheme and accept 27% of those refugees like Bolton Council did for the Gateway Protection Programme? 27% will be 5,400 Syrian refugees and a central government payment of £46 million to Bolton Council for the first year. In 2018, members of the Bolton Socialist Club, not all of course, will be knocking on your doors on behalf of the Labour Party. These socialists, with strong ties to the unions, will be out convincing you to vote for their party of choice, Labour. In our opinion, they have zero concerns for refugees. This is all about cash for Bolton Labour Council and using those refugees as pawns to rig the future voting system with Labour voters when the refugees acquire British citizenship. So, as we finish this video, we have one final thing to prove. Has Labour spent that £3 to £4 million granted under the Gateway Protection Programme on helping those refugees integrate? We've made a Freedom of Information request that specifically asks for a breakdown of those finances. If Bolton Council refuse to release the information or make any excuses in not providing the information, we will know that the refugees being accepted by Bolton Council has nothing to do with the refugees' welfare and integration, but everything to do with the money. Finally, do not be afraid to speak out. Do not let the left and socialists use intimidation and misinformation to shut you down from discussing your hometown. You have a right to raise your concerns, and you have a right to be provided with the truth.